Kara and I are just up the hills taking a walk. This is the day after the big storm that came through. So you see, I was thinking as we were walking up here, well, that's quite good. All the close planted Sitka spruces, they've done quite well. Well, this edge here, what's called a green edge, are still all standing. But then you look inside, and it's pretty much like the Somme. Whole stands of trees are just toppled over, ripped up. And on the one hand, it's strange that the trees that are in the middle have copped it worse than these trees on the edge. So we've got this stand of trees, and then we've got all the jumble of roots. And this is part of the narrative that we often have with foresters about how the problem, we have to plant trees close together in Scotland because of wind blow. But actually, what this tells you is a different story. That if you plant trees in these regimented, close proximities, which gives you nice straight stems with very little branches, so it becomes quite a good commercial crop, they don't get space to spread their roots, and so they become very vulnerable to high winds. Whereas the ones on the edge that have that little bit more room, in this stand at least, suddenly are much more resilient and are able to withstand those really high winds, gusting certainly into the 80s and 90s up here. I mean, that's not always true, because what you often have is in areas of clear felling. So for example, if we imagine that there have been trees here and then they were cut up to here, what you have then is even more vulnerable trees, because all these trees would have had very shallow roots and then will be totally exposed to a wind hitting them from the side. Yeah, anyway, there we go. Quite something. Some trees snapped off as well, which tells you about the ferocity of the wind. But the main issue is just them being blown over and the roots kind of coming out basically at ground level. So does it matter? Why does it matter, I should say? Well, I reckon you could make a strong case for all of this wind blow, all this damage, all of this apparent devastation being a good thing. Almost like a nature restorative, clearing space. Now, the sad truth is that probably it won't be that, because this thing will be cleared up and someone will plant a similar crop, maybe not Sitka spruce because of all the spruce dieback, but Norway spruce or something else will be planted to this similar density. So here's why it matters. Here we have a stand of the trees that's less damaged. You can still see a lot of wind blowing in the distance, but further up it's a very different story. We've still got the original closely planted crops of Sitka spruce trees, and nothing else is grown. Nothing at all. No, the rich diversity that was once here is now not here. So instead we have moss and we have Sitka spruce. Very, very few birds. You know, maybe a few crows up in the tops of the stems of trees. Midges, deer that can scurry and hide under the branches, and it becomes a very safe place for them to multiply, which is what they are doing. But yeah, no chance whatsoever for nature to recover, for the biodiversity that once covered these hills to return. Yeah, it's a shame. It's a terrible shame. As if we've not learned any lessons. These are the newly planted, or fairly newly planted, crop, which is young enough and supple enough to survive the intense winds that we've just had. One of the problems that I'm sure lots of you will know about is this phenomenon of spruce dieback, which is a problem that's affected across Europe. It was in England first, and basically people gave up trying to control it, and then there's been a huge effort in Scotland until even last year to try and control it by cutting back huge areas around the areas of infection to try and stop the spread, even though actually it seems like the disease spreads on the wind. So actually I think it was always going to be a futile effort. And obviously the discussion that we've had is trying to work out, well, what causes these big diseases? Where do they come from and how do you control them? And I think most people believe that they're a natural response to huge areas of monocrop, in the same ways that the various places in America who have even greater areas of monocrop have problems with diseases that wipe out whole areas. That's what we're seeing here. And yet, our response to spruce dieback, or Sitka spruce diseases, is to plant a different spruce. In this case, blue spruce or Norway spruce. I don't quite know which ones these are. I suspect it is Norway spruce. And maybe in 30 years' time, 40 years' time, when these vast plantations have also had diseases, we'll have to cut all those back as well. Just kind of, the other issue is to do with whether or not we should worry about these trees and the fact that we don't have diversity, and whether we should worry about the big storm just doing the damage that it did. And actually, one thing we should bear in mind is that all of the climate models, the weather models say that these events, I mean that storm yesterday was thought to be the most powerful in Scotland for 20 years. So all the weather models are predicting that these so-called unusual events will become more common. And the irony, of course, is that our protection, our attempts to moderate the effects of human-inspired climate change, have to also embrace the fact that ecosystems which evolved to balance and evolved to achieve balance need to be restored. Not just because we're losing things that are precious to us, but also because if we didn't, we're at risk. Our culture is at risk as a result of doing what we're seeing here. And that's not a criticism of the foresters that are responsible for this, who are driven by commercial imperatives. I'm not even sure that we can't balance and still have those commercial imperatives alongside the rest. But actually, at the moment, we're not doing any of the restoration here. We're only doing the commercial. And in response to a commercial failure, putting in some more commercials instead. We're trying to learn from that mistake. In the meantime, it's still very beautiful here.